Hello and welcome to the Strike a Balance podcast for working homeschool moms. This is Charlotte Jones. I'm a homeschool coach and homeschooling mom of twin boys. I know it can feel really overwhelming to keep all the balls in the air all the time. So each week I chat about tips and strategies for being a happy and thriving working homeschool mom that you can implement in your life too. I also speak to awesome and inspiring women who manage to juggle homeschooling and work successfully and find out what their secrets are. Be sure to check out my time audit and mindset challenge in the show notes and sign up to my newsletter for lots of cool freebies. And if you ever need to chat, please book in a session with me. I'm so excited for you to be here and I hope you'll get so much value out of this episode. So let's get started. Are you looking for a new math curriculum? Well, I'm thrilled to introduce our favorite math curriculum to you. CTCMath specializes in providing online video tutorials that take a multi-sensory approach to learning. Favorably reviewed in Cathy Duffy's 102 top picks and the old Schoolhouse crew review, the lessons are short and concise to help your children break down concepts and appreciate math in a whole new way. The lessons are taught the traditional way and not to a test. Each one of the video tutorials is taught by an internationally acclaimed teacher, Pat Murray, who is renowned for teaching math concepts in a simple, easy to understand way and in only a few minutes at a time. Using a multi-sensory approach means having the combination of effective graphics and animation synchronized with the voice of a friendly teacher together with a practical assessment. This three-pronged attack makes learning so much easier and more effective. Even students who struggled with math are getting fantastic results, and ones who were doing okay before are now doing brilliantly. Visit ctcmath.com today to start your free trial. CTC Maths is generously offering my listeners an amazing special. Go to www.ctcmath.com/MLH to get a half price discount plus a bonus 6 months for free. That's ctcmath.com/MLH. I'm so excited to welcome my dear friend Kelly back to the podcast. Kelly is a working homeschool mom and she's got more than 18 years experience teaching English language arts, and she's going to share some of her insights and ideas. But before we get started, maybe you could tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, Kelly.
Hi, Charlotte. I'm excited to be here again. Um, I am a homeschool mom and I'm also an English teacher. I started teaching English, a little over 18 years ago. I was a high school English teacher and then I moved into middle school and high school. And then in 2003, I decided that I needed to leave traditional teaching for a variety of reasons and started homeschooling both of my children. And so ever since, it's been wonderful to be able to bridge both worlds of being home with my kids and homeschooling, and then also teaching. So I teach online, and every year I add more and more students. The older my kids get, the more flexibility and time I have to devote to teaching, and so I feel really fortunate that I get to do both.
Okay, excellent. So I know a lot of both parents and children find reading and writing challenging. So maybe parents feel like they're not qualified to teach their kids or that their kids need to reach certain milestones, or kids might find it overwhelming or boring, or they might not be engaged. So what are some of the kind of specific issues that parents and kids encounter that you have come across in your years of teaching?
Sure. So, with both my teaching experience and my own children, I would say the number one thing that I find when it comes to kids having challenges with reading and writing is being pushed to read and write before they're ready. And this can set up all sorts of challenges in terms of learning challenges and behavioral challenges, a lack of interest, and just not wanting to do something you don't want to do. None of us want to do something we don't want to do. So that's the first thing I've encountered a lot. The second thing I've found is when a child is struggling with reading or writing, the approach can really set them in one direction or another. So, you know, none of us ever want to make our kids feel bad, but if we're really critical of their um, their reading or writing, that certainly is going to make them not want to read or write. And then we have, neurodiversity, learning differences like dyslexia, which can add another layer to kids needing a different approach to how reading and writing are taught. And so it's not, for some kids it is intuitive, and that they do just seem to decode and be able to read. But I would say the majority of kids need they need a lot of modeling. They need a lot of time to find themselves in along their reading journey, and then with writing especially, they need to be able to express themselves and find joy in writing and play and use games and all of those things before they're um, introduced to any type of academic writing or certain structure that's going to really make it hard for them to find their own writing voice, and that leads to them having challenges in thinking critically when they're writing. And anyway, there's all sorts of problems that arise as they get older, but those are some of the things I've found.
And then maybe for homeschooling parents who feel like obviously they have this responsibility now that they need to teach their kids to read and write, what are some of the challenges that they face?
Well, I would say the first thing is, if you're and we all do this, comparing yourself to, or comparing your child to where they, are said to need to be in school. I think there's a myth that, if kids are in school, that they're reading at a certain level. That's just not true. Um, so that means that kids that are homeschooled are also not necessarily reading at certain levels by age. Um, and so I think, if we're trying to kind of keep up with the um, with the myth, that definitely can set us off on a rocky path. Also, just kind of not really knowing what resources to use. There are a lot of resources out there. Some are good, some are not, and so that can certainly be a challenge. I think when I tell people when they're starting to homeschool, especially with little kids, let them play and read to them. That's the best thing that we can do. Just read to them, read to them, read to them. Go to the library, get those bags and bags of books, let them pick out the books they want to read. This is going to be one of the best ways that we can grow a reader. It feels too simple. Like, oh no, we couldn't be doing enough, because when you look into at least an American kindergarten, a lot of them are already pushing reading, pushing writing, all of these things. And my son was in kindergarten in a school that, it was a good school. He had good teachers, but I saw him get pushed to read and write early, and he still doesn't enjoy it. And it was that the reason? I mean, I don't know. I don't have, it's hard to tell, but I do know that my daughter, on the other hand, was allowed to come into her own with reading and writing. She did it much, much later than he did, and she doesn't seem to have any of the just disdain for it. And when I brought him to homeschooling in second grade, while he could read, again, how mainstream school would say he was on level, he was above level. He didn't want to. He hated it, and it took us a lot of years of unschooling to get him to want to just read and write on his own. And even now, I wouldn't say that it's something that he particularly would choose or enjoy. And again, there's lots of people who don't love to read and write. I don't think there's a guarantee that we can, any of us as parents, homeschoolers, teachers we can't guarantee our children are going to love one thing or like something or excel at something. But I think there are there's definitely, seems to me to be a pattern of when we push kids too early, when we insist that they be at a certain level or be doing something, and they're not ready, that we're really setting them up to not want to do that thing for years to come.
And what are kind of some of the practical ways that, okay, you spoke a little bit about homeschooling, but when you teach kids, what are some of the practical ways that you can help them to overcome some of these challenges?
The number one thing that I always start with is interest. I think it's really important for us to get to know our students and children. I mean, of course, we know our children, but sometimes, and I'm guilty of this, we do a lot of assuming and we don't ask them, like, what do you want to read about? What do you want to write about? And it's always interesting to me to learn, the answers, again, even with my own children, and also to see parents kind of surprised by the things that their kids would say. I've had a number of parents like, oh, I would have never have thought that my kid would be interested in that type of book, or that writing genre. So I think we really want to try to make sure that our kids are active participants in their learning, and that they're being asked what it is that they're interested in. And sometimes kids will say, I don't know. And so then it's a matter of gently digging a little bit deeper. What are the things that you do when you're not in school, or you're not, homeschooling? If you could do anything right now, what would you be doing? And so um, that's a way for us to help kids get into reading and writing, because reading and writing is not easy, and it asks our brains to do a lot of different things. It asks our hands and our eyes and our everything to just engage, and there's a lot of focus required. And so if we're reading things, writing things that we're not interested in, and then we're also challenged by all the different things that are being required of us, it can make it really painful. And so I try to always make sure that I talk to the kids and find out what's their interest. If when I meet with kids one on one, the first thing I say is, what do you want to write about today? Or what do you want to read about today? And and initially kids can be a little bit hesitant because a lot of them haven't been asked before. They just are told what to read or told what to write. But eventually they get pretty excited. And as soon as I, turn on the camera, can we read about blah, blah, blah? Um, and these are kids who don't like to read, so they say. But I think we do start to like to do things when, again, they appeal to our interests. The other piece is making sure that our connections are really strong with our kids, so that they feel safe to struggle, and they're allowed the time to figure things out. I think just practically, one of the things that can be the most harmful is not a great word, but that can set kids back, is if when we're reading with kids, we don't give them the time to figure out the word, or we just immediately correct them. That's jarring, to just constantly have someone telling you what you're doing wrong. And it's also doesn't give kids the opportunity to make mistakes and figure it out. So when I'm reading with a kid, I always try to give them a chance to get through the sentence, get through the paragraph, and then I'll say, that was awesome. Let's go back and look at a couple of these words. And so then we go back, and I'll, point out a word and say, what does this word say again? And sometimes they know it. It's just, as they were reading, as we all do, we stumble over words. And then sometimes they don't, and then we can go back and look at that particular word or sentence. But if every single time a kid made a mistake, especially readers who are struggling to decode, I immediately screamed out the right answer or said the right answer, that's, first of all, breaking up their own ability to comprehend. And it's also just no fun. So,
Mm.
and again, trying to make it fun is another thing that's super important. We don't want our kids to feel tortured when they're reading or writing, because who wants to do that? So, making sure that they have just short amounts of things that they're doing each time, and then increasing it as they feel ready. I writing for example, I always start kids off with a 5-minute fast write, and then I can't tell you how many times they'll be like, "Can we do a 7-minute one this time? I think can we do 10 minutes?" And they're the ones. So trying to let them lead, and they're the ones who start to choose more and more and more. It takes some patience. It takes definitely as parents kind of letting go and being like having to tell yourself, like, you know what, they're going to be just fine. Like, it's okay that they're, I don't think my daughter started really reading like independently, sitting down with a book until she was maybe 11, like with a novel. If my son, on the other hand, was expected to do that in first grade. And so he was what, 7? So, there's a lot of patience that's required, especially if you're, again, comparing them to what society or whoever it is saying this is what a kid should be doing at that age. But she's a terrific reader and she's a vivacious reader, and I have no worries that about her. Did I when she was 8 and 9 and 10? Sometimes it would creep in. I would start to be like, okay, but it worked. And I've heard from many, many, many other parents that it works as well. So yeah, if you're listening and you're concerned about your child's reading, I would say, just keep reading to them. Don't ignore that. Don't make it. Don't just be like, well, they don't like to read, so we're never going to read. Do read alouds. So keep tons of books in your house. Like I said, go to the library, have them check out as many books as they want, and surround them with books and read to them and read to them and encourage them, to read in a gentle way. And eventually, I do believe it will all come together.
And a lot of parents also have this idea that grammar and spelling are incredibly important. We like to, I suppose, me as a second language teacher, I'm quite sensitive to grammar and spelling and things like that. What is your idea about the importance of these two skills?
Well, I mean, our children do need to have these skills. However, I think, again, they can be taught in a way that really tunes into the child's knowledge, their journey with reading and writing, with their own reading and writing. And so, I would say, for me, and when I taught secondary and middle school, and also my own children, spelling and grammar, I did it within their writing. That's how I teach my students now. We start off by doing fast writes and just writing to get all of our ideas out, because as a writer, as someone who works with adult writers, that's what we do. We're not focused on spelling and grammar. And then, then after, once we get our ideas and start to really refine the writing and whatnot, then we start to look at, what words do we need to revise, and so that's when I help kids look at their spelling and grammar. One thing with spelling that I think can be really helpful is using the words that the kids are using in their writing or that they use frequently, to focus on those spelling words. I'm not a huge fan of like learning thematic spelling lists, or when they're little, I think it can be really helpful to teach phonics, and that certainly can help with spelling. And I have done that, reading and spelling programs that can be really helpful, that are phonics based, like All About Spelling and Orton Gillingham. And we can use these in a way, and still with helping kids with their interests, use their interest, and with through play and whatnot. I do think it is important to help younger kids, or kids who are starting to get interested in reading, when we're learning the alphabet and stuff, to be practicing and learning and playing with sounds. And that can definitely help with spelling. However, as they get older, I think it's important for them to look at their own needs specifically within their writing. So, looking at the words that they're misspelling, looking at the sentences that they're creating, and then we can start to teach, again, really gently. I don't love diagramming sentences or workbooks that just ask kids to do the problems over and over again. I don't think that's super helpful. Um, but to actually look in their writing and be like, all right, so, you know, these are the reasons why we use a comma. So look at this sentence that you just wrote. Like, what comma would you put there, do you think? Or where would you put the comma? Um, and to try to help them really practice it within their writing can be really helpful. So I don't teach spelling and grammar in the way that we're going to sit down and, again, do diagram sentences, or um, we're going to do a whole bunch of sentences then, over and over again. I think it's really good for us to do it within the child's writing.
And I think if you teach grammar and spelling in that way, it is much more natural, though, isn't it? And like you said, more useful.
Well, because I think then kids can immediately start to apply it, and so sometimes, a lot of times, what I've noticed is when there are spelling lists, or, um, I can remember back when I was in school and we had, spelling lists and spelling bees. Yeah, you might be able to memorize the spelling word, for the test. I could never, but maybe maybe other people could. But then, are you using it? Are you able to then transfer it into your writing? I mean, that's the important part. And so, why not just start looking at, teaching grammar and spelling directly in the kids' writing, and kind of skip the list part? One thing that can be really helpful, just again as a practical tool, is to create a word wall. And so I often have students who, do struggle with spelling, to start to keep a list of the words that they're constantly misspelling. Write it in their notebook, wherever they're writing, put it on a piece of paper, stick it by your computer, whatever the case is. And then, that way they just have a tool, and it's their personal spelling list, and they can look at it and be like, oh yeah, that's right. I always misspell, there, and there. So now I've got it written up, and I can use that as a tool for myself. I also am a huge fan of things like Grammarly. I have a number of students that use Grammarly, and, sure, sometimes they just click, 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 but I do find, especially when I'm working with them, to for them to be able to say why. So why do you think Grammarly highlighted this? And then try to get them to talk about it and explain it. And so how do you think you're going to need to fix it? This kind of thing. So just in a way that's really conversational, practical, but also directly related to their writing, to what they're creating. And again, this is after they have gotten their ideas down, and their focus has been on their ideas, their interpretation, their critical thinking, whatever. Then we worry about spelling and grammar. It's not, it's, to me, it's more important for them to have a voice, for them to, again, be thinking critically, for them to be developing their ideas and able to really talk and discuss and think about what they're reading or writing. The grammar and spelling comes much later, just like it does for, I would say, the majority of people who write books. And, they also have editors, so they get a lot more help. We expect a lot of kids, a lot that we do not expect from
Yeah.
adults.
Absolutely. And it's almost like we don't allow them to use the tools that are out there. So, for example, I let my kids use a calculator for very long addition, or
Hmm.
why not, typing? My kids really do not like to write, but
Right.
to type. Why not give them the opportunity to use the tools that they are probably going to be using when they're adults anyway?
Absolutely. And typing is a really great way to get kids writing. A lot of kids would much rather type than than write. And so be it. I think and I think that this idea that if kids don't develop good handwriting and whatnot, that they're going to be lost. And so I don't know what, I don't I just don't think that's true. My child, I've said this before on maybe our first podcast, certainly in our lives, for his whole elementary school years, he held a pencil in a way that, those of us who are older would have just been totally reamed out in school for, and his handwriting penmanship is wonderful. Anyway, I think typing is a wonderful way for us to encourage our kids to write. Just like finding, if our kids love graphic novels. For a lot of
Mm,
years they're not real reading if they're not, if there are pictures. I call BS on that. Graphic
mm.
novels are a wonderful way for kids to become readers and practice reading.
And maybe you can tell me a little bit more about teaching neurodiverse kids, because I know you have quite a lot of experience in that. What are some of the issues and some of the ways to overcome those kind of very additional needs, let's say, that they might have?
Well, the first thing I would say, it's really important to meet the child where they are. So, again, not having some kind of measuring stick of where they need to be, but really looking at where they are and then working with them. My experience has been working with older students. And so these kids are often coming to me with a lot of suffering in their past in terms of how they've been treated or how they view themselves as learners. Not a lot of confidence needs to be created first before we actually start learning. And so I would say, if you're working with a child who's older, who already is, really feeling like they can't, you and I have talked about growth mindset. I mean, those are really important pieces to them being able to do things that are challenging, just having that mindset that they actually can, feeling confident, really feeling celebrated for the things that they can do already. And then using, depending on the child, I mean, again, it has to be really tailored to the individual child, but what are the things that they enjoy doing? What are their interests? What are the ways that they learn best? Super important. And then making sure that, the people that they're working with, that they have a connection with, because it's going to be hard. They're going to be having to face these challenges, and they need to be able to do it in a safe way where they feel, again, encouraged and safe to make mistakes. So some ways that I've found can be really helpful for, again, it's so dependent on the individual child, but let's say I have a student who wants to read but is having a hard time doing, I read a paragraph, you read a paragraph, I read a paragraph, you read a paragraph. Or like for one of my older students who, he's in high school and he reads well, and that if you heard him reading out loud, you would be like, oh, this child's a great reader, but he doesn't remember anything that he's read. And so, when I'm working with him, for instance, he gets really exhausted reading, even though, again, if you heard him reading out loud, every word is perfectly spoken. But it's exhausting for him because his brain is focusing so much on reading the actual words. It's not easy for him to actually take in the information. And so we read really short paragraphs. First of all, I let him pick what it is that he wants to read. That's really important. And then we read short paragraphs, and then we'll stop and we just talk about it in a conversation, not in like, tell me everything that you just read, but like, so what do you think's happening? And we just have these conversations going back and forth about it. And then, if he feels good to keep reading, then he goes, and if he wants me to take a turn reading, then I go. And so, I think so much about teaching, about working with children, is honoring and being respectful of what they need. If a kid needs a break, give them a break. If they need somebody to read to them, if they need extra time, like, these are kind things that we should be offering. But it does take time. And when our kids are in school and whatnot, I mean, teachers, I they are expected to do, which is one of the reasons I left teaching, to do so much in such a short amount of time. It's impossible for them to meet the needs of each of the children. But as homeschoolers, we have this awesome opportunity to really be able to let our kids have the time that they need And so I think, really being with your child and having conversations while you're reading, and being able to take turns, or with writing, some kids, and I do this with a lot of my students as well, I write a sentence, they write a sentence. And of course, then I try to challenge them. Well, can you write, especially little ones, they love that. Well, can you write 5 sentences? And then if there's a lot of pushback and they start to kind of, get upset, it's like, okay, well, hang on. Let's go back to you and I write a sentence. You have to just kind of gauge it. We want to encourage our kids. We want them to take on challenges and whatnot, but we also, again, don't want to make it where we're constantly fighting and that relationship is being broken, and then nobody wants to do anything. We're at our wits' end, they're at their wits' end, and it's, then the lesson's just out the window.
Yeah. Definitely. But I think it can be hard to, especially at the beginning when you're homeschooling, maybe to meet your child where they are, because you also don't feel confident in your own teaching, I think, or in your ability to kind of teach them, I think. And that's why I think it's very useful to kind of outsource as well, I think, teaching sometimes. And that kind of brings me to the last point. You said you've got something really exciting to share. I know you're working on a new language arts program, so maybe you can tell us a little bit about Creative ELA.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, I will just really briefly speak about outsourcing. Absolutely. I don't think there's ever any shame in recognizing where are our strengths as parents, as homeschoolers, and where could we use a little bit of extra help. I certainly outschool for the things that, or outsource rather, for the things that, are not my expertise, or I don't feel like I am, um, I'm not as helpful for my child as someone else would be. And so I think it's wonderful that we have so many opportunities to really, or so many different resources rather, to find the opportunity that's great for our kid. Again, we're in school, they don't get to choose. And so I love that, for instance, with math, that's not something that I feel like I can offer my child the best experience, but just with me. And so together we looked at lots of different math programs, and she found one that she really liked, and is finding a lot of success with it. And I'm super grateful for that. I don't feel bad that that's not something I'm able to offer her, because I am offering it to her. I'm offering it to her by, you know, paying for it, and by supporting her in the work that she's doing. So creative ELA, I'm super excited about. It's something that I've been dreaming about, really, even before I left teaching. And I would think about, you know, I loved my students, and I loved their families. Those were the things that kept me in the classroom for so long, despite the fact that there were so many other things that were really, really challenging and kind of life draining. And so I remember thinking, like, if only I could take my classroom and my students and just remove them from all this other stuff that wasn't serving them, certainly wasn't serving me. And so that's what Creative ELA is. It's a online curriculum that is going to be offered in kind of a hybrid fashion, because I do want to be able to keep teaching. I don't just want to create a curriculum and hand it off to families. I mean, that's fine if that's what a family wants, but I I think it's really nice to have the outsourcing as well, and to have the support. And I, again, love teaching. And so I would hate to not be doing that. So Creative ELA is a way for me to take the units and the lessons and all of the learnings that I feel really fortunate to have and offer them to homeschool families while still offering live teaching. So every month I'll be releasing a new thematic unit study. And at the beginning of the month, there'll be live classes for kids to come. They're not webinar, like they're truly live classes where kids will be able to talk and interact and whatnot. Um, and we'll kind of jumpstart the unit together and do lots of different activities and hopefully get them really excited about the different things that they're going to be doing. And then they'll be able to go through the unit in any way that works for the individual families. Some families, I imagine, for parents who really do love being engaging in reading and writing with their kiddos, they're going to want to have a more hands-on active approach. For families who are maybe looking for their kids to be more independent, then my activities and lessons, and there's going to be video lessons and all sorts of other types of lessons that are interactive and really lay out. There's a student workbook that kids can use. And so, it just really is dependent on the child and the family and how they want to work through it. And then at the end of the unit, we'll come back together again, another live class, and we'll do all sorts of discussion, and they'll be able to share the things that they've learned and the things that they've created. On top of that, I found this way to create an online community off of social media. And so families will be able to log on to my website, and there'll be member only areas where kids again can discuss what they're learning with other students. They can, post the poems and different things that they're creating, and families can talk, so they can problem solve and talk not just about creative ELA, but really anything related to homeschooling. I'll do some pop-up lives, and again, they'll be able to access all of the material right there. They'll also receive a PDF. So for families who just don't want that piece, you'll have everything in one PDF that you can print or not print. It's super important to me that it's really flexible, because I know that there's not one type of homeschooler, that we're all very different. And so I don't want, to assume that a family likes doing things in one way. I want you to really be able to use my curriculum in a way that works for your child. I also am very familiar with the variety of ways that kids learn. So it's really important to me that all of my activities offer kids different ways to access the material. All of my material is focused on creativity, however, so that's why it's called Creative ELA. So all writing that we're doing is creative writing. The reading that we're doing, we're going to be looking at these really, my favorite novels and poetry and short stories, really creative pieces. And then the way that kids are interacting with these pieces of literature and nonfiction, different types of writing. Again, it's a creative approach. So you're not going to find, like when I say a student workbook, they're not worksheets. It's lots of hands-on projects, digging into not only the themes and the characters' lives and the different cultures that the characters are a part of, but also how these things are actually meaningful to the student, how the student feels, how the student would feel, trying to really bring the story inside the student and the story inside and the student inside the story. So that's Creative ELA. I'm super excited about it. Our first unit will begin September 1st, and that's when the live classes will start. And so enrollment will open in August. And until then, people can head to my website and join the wait list. There's no commitment. It's just a matter of you'll be able to then know when everything goes live, and then join this online community and kind of look around and see if it's something you think that your kiddos would want to be a part of, if you'd want to be a part of, and then you can sign up. And this membership will be for an entire family. So you don't have to buy individual memberships for each of your kids. The age is aimed at like upper elementary, middle school, but certainly if you have, younger kids or older kids, I mean, I think, and I'll offer some ways that you can modify the curriculum, but it definitely could be something all of these projects and things I think could be used for the entire family. And especially if you're like doing a read aloud with younger students. And there's going to be so many different activities and so many different ways for kids to choose. Because again, as I've been talking, choice is so important. And so you won't necessarily have your kids all doing the same projects. They might choose different projects, even though they're focusing on one kind of theme and one or two different pieces of literature.
And is there anywhere that somebody can see kind of your teaching style or get a taste of kind of how you run a class?
Sure. So I do have a free workshop up on Curiosity Encouraged, which is my webpage, and it is a recorded class where I'm talking to the student. It's called The Ideas Inside Me, and it offers kids an hour-long class that encourages them to find all the things that they could write about. Because oftentimes when I meet kids who don't like to write, it's because, again, they've either been told what to write about or they've never thought about what they could write about. It doesn't even occur to them that they have things they could write about. And so this class is to help kids just get all of their ideas down on the page and almost, I think 100% of the time. I've done this activity when I first started teaching. I was introduced to it, and it's been something that I've used every year. They find something, they're like, oh, I want to write about that. And that's the start of a kid just saying, oh, I want to write about that. Because our kids are storytellers, and they want to share, and they're kids, they want to talk about themselves, or the things that they're interested in. So it's just a matter of encouraging them to take those things that they're super excited about, that they want to talk about, and try to get them to put some words on the page.
Sounds fantastic. And obviously, I will link everything in the show notes as well. Thank you so much, Kayla. It was really, really fantastic to hear about your thoughts and experiences about reading and writing. And thanks for taking the time to chat to us today.
Thank you so much. I love being here.
I really hope you enjoyed the episode. Drop me a DM on Instagram or post on the Working Homeschool Mom support group over on Facebook. And let me know what resonated the most with you. It would also be great if you could rate, review, and subscribe, or share the podcast with a working homeschool mom who might need it. It's my mission to support as many working homeschool moms as possible. Until next time, take care. Hello and welcome to the Strike a Balance podcast for working homeschool moms. This is Charlotte Jones. I'm a homeschool coach and homeschooling mom of twin boys. I know it can feel really overwhelming to keep all the balls in the air all the time. So each week I chat about tips and strategies for being a happy